"I'll make you lose your mind," the Apache widow said to the lonely rancher who would change her life. Jack Thompson lived on the edge of the Arizona desert, where the sun blazed down on his ranch almost every day, turning the land golden and dry. The ranch had been in his family for generations, and ever since his wife Emily had passed away, Jack had been alone. The quiet of the desert was comforting sometimes, but most days it reminded him painfully of the emptiness in his life. The ranch needed him, of course. Cattle had to be fed, fences had to be repaired, and the water troughs had to be filled. But beyond that, Jack's days had little meaning. He would wake up early, tend to the cows, fix a broken fence here or there, and then sit on the porch at night, staring at the horizon as the sun sank behind the mountains. Jack wasn't old, but he had grown used to solitude. The townspeople would see him in the general store once a week, buying supplies and exchanging polite nods, but he didn't often talk to anyone for long. After Emily's death, he had shut himself off from the world, thinking that no one could replace the warmth she had given him. Some nights he would walk the ranch alone, listening to the wind whisper through the dry grass and the occasional cry of a coyote. He missed the sound of laughter, the feel of a hand at his, and the quiet conversations that had once filled his home. Rumors about his neighbors often reached Jack, though he didn't usually act on them. One story that kept coming back was about a woman named Maya Redhawk, who lived on the outskirts of the nearby Apache reservation. People in town whispered about her as if she were a force of nature, strong, proud, and a little dangerous. They said she had lost her husband many years ago and that she had raised her children on her own. Some called her fierce, others said she was unapproachable. Jack had never met her, and part of him didn't want to. But another part, a small, curious part he hardly admitted even to himself, wondered what it would be like to know someone like her. One morning, as Jack was inspecting the fence that separated his ranch from the empty fields beyond, he noticed that one of the posts had snapped. He frowned, muttering to himself. The winds had been strong last night, and the cattle had wandered close to the edge. He sighed. Fixing fences was part of the routine, but today it felt heavier. There was a stubbornness in the way he approached life now. He did everything out of habit, not joy. And as he measured the broken post and gathered the tools he would need, he felt a small pang of loneliness that he quickly shook off. The day was hot, the kind of heat that made the sweat stick to your skin and the air shimmer in the distance. Jack worked methodically, hammering the new post into place and tying the rails carefully. His thoughts wandered as he worked, drifting back to Emily and the life they had shared. She had loved these lands with him. She would have laughed at his frown over a broken fence. He shook his head and tried to focus on the work, but the quiet of the desert allowed his mind to wander freely, and memories came flooding back. Later that afternoon, as Jack loaded hay into the barn, he saw a figure in the distance walking across the dry field toward him. At first, he thought it might be a traveler or a neighbor, but as the figure drew closer, he realized it was a woman. Tall, with dark hair pulled back, and eyes that seemed to observe everything around her. There was an intensity in her gaze, and as she approached, Jack noticed a quiet confidence in the way she walked, almost like the land itself recognized her. "Jack Thompson?" she called out, her voice firm but calm. Jack paused, wiping the sweat from his brow. "I'm Maya Redhawk. I live nearby. Looks like you could use some help with that fence." Jack hesitated. He wasn't used to strangers offering help, and certainly not someone like her. He wanted to say no, to send her away politely, but something about her made him stop. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, or the faint but undeniable strength in her voice. I can manage," he said finally, his voice uncertain. Maya smiled faintly, not unkindly. "I'll make you lose your mind if you try to refuse," she said, her tone teasing but serious. Jack blinked. He wasn't sure if she was joking or if she was warning him. Either way, he felt a strange stir of curiosity and unease. He watched as she moved with ease, lifting the heavy wooden rails and securing them faster than he could have managed alone. Her hands were strong, skilled, and steady. Jack found himself studying her, noticing the small details, the way her hair caught the sun, the quiet determination in her eyes, the subtle way she gave orders to the animals to keep them calm while they worked. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, and though he wouldn't admit it to anyone, he felt a flicker of excitement he hadn't felt in years. When the work was done, they sat on the edge of the barn, sharing a bottle of water and watching the cattle graze. Jack felt a nervousness he didn't understand. He had spent so many years alone, thinking he was content in his solitude, but Maya's presence was unsettling in a good way. It made him realize how much he had missed having someone nearby, someone who challenged him, someone who made him feel alive again. "You're different from the people in town," Jack said finally, breaking the silence. He wasn't sure why he said it, but it seemed important. Maya looked at him carefully, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "I get that a lot," she said. "People are usually afraid of what they don't understand." "And you're afraid of what you might feel." Jack frowned, unsure how to respond. She was right, though. He had built walls around himself, telling himself that he didn't need anyone, that he could survive alone. But sitting there with her, he realized how lonely he had really been. Her words were gentle but cutting, like a mirror showing him the truth he had been avoiding. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the land, Maya stood and stretched. "I should be going," she said, "but I'll see you again. Don't forget what I said. I'll make you lose your mind." Jack watched her walk back toward the reservation, feeling a mixture of curiosity, fear, and anticipation. He didn't know what she meant exactly, but he sensed that meeting her had changed something in him. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of life he thought he had lost forever. That night, Jack sat on his porch after dinner, staring at the darkening sky filled with stars. The desert was quiet except for the distant howl of a coyote, and yet he didn't feel empty. He felt expectant. Something was coming, something that would challenge him and shake the foundations of the life he had built alone. And even though he wasn't sure he was ready, he felt a small thrill of hope. Maya Red Hawk had entered his life like a storm on the horizon, unexpected, powerful, and impossible to ignore. Jack knew that the days ahead would be different. He didn't know if they would be easier or harder, but he had a feeling that for the first time in a long time, he was not alone. The desert night was calm, but in Jack's heart a quiet excitement stirred. He didn't yet understand the depths of the changes coming, but he was beginning to realize that sometimes life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. And in the loneliness of the Arizona desert under the endless sky, Jack Thompson had taken the first step toward a new chapter, a chapter that would be shaped by someone fierce, fearless, and unforgettable. The next few days after Maya's visit, Jack Thompson couldn't stop thinking about her. He returned to his usual routines on the ranch, feeding the cattle, fixing broken fences, and checking water troughs. But every task seemed heavier, as if his mind kept wandering to the woman who had appeared like a sudden storm in his quiet life. He tried to convince himself that it was just curiosity, or maybe a passing fancy, but deep down he knew it was something more, something he hadn't felt in years. The town was quieter than usual that week. Jack stopped at the general store to buy supplies, and as he exchanged greetings with the shopkeeper, Mrs. Harper, he caught himself thinking about Maya again. "She's tough, isn't she?" he muttered to himself, almost under his breath. Mrs. Harper, who was restocking the shelves, overheard him. "Mm-hmm. You met her, didn't you?" she asked with a knowing smile. Jack flushed but nodded. "Yes," he said simply, avoiding her eyes. "Be careful, Jack," she warned gently. "Maya Redhawk is strong and independent. She doesn't trust easily. But if she lets someone in, it means a lot. Just remember that." Jack nodded again, unsure what to make of her words, but they stayed with him as he walked back to his truck. That evening, a storm rolled in from the west. The sky darkened quickly, and strong winds swept across the open desert. Jack had barely finished securing the cattle when he noticed a branch had fallen across one of the fences. The wind was so strong that the fence post looked ready to snap. He sighed, realizing he would have to repair it before the cattle wandered too far. As he gathered his tools, he muttered to himself, wishing for an extra pair of hands. Then, almost as if on cue, Maya appeared at the edge of the field, her dark hair whipped by the wind and her coat flapping around her. She moved with the confidence of someone used to the outdoors, her boots steady on the uneven ground. "Need a hand?" she called over the roar of the wind. Jack hesitated, then nodded. She came closer, carrying a bundle of supplies effortlessly. "I told you I'd make you lose your mind," she said with a small smirk. "I didn't lie." Jack laughed softly, shaking his head. "You're something else, Maya Redhawk." They worked together as the storm worsened. Jack was amazed at her skill, how she tied knots quickly and securely, and how she could lift heavy beams without effort. At first, they didn't speak much, letting the sound of the wind and the occasional cry of the cattle fill the silence. But as they worked, conversation slowly started to flow. "I heard about your husband," Jack said cautiously, not wanting to overstep. Maya stiffened slightly but didn't look away. "I lost him many years ago," she said quietly. "It wasn't easy, but I've learned to take care of myself and my family." Her eyes softened for a moment as she glanced at the distant horizon, as if remembering something painful yet important. Jack nodded, understanding. "I know what it's like to lose someone. Emily, she was my life." And now his voice trailed off. Maya didn't interrupt. She just handed him another beam, and together they secured the fence. By the time the storm passed, the ranch was in better shape than it had been in weeks. Jack and Maya stood looking at the completed fence, both tired but satisfied. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond his usual routine. There was something energizing about working with someone else, someone who challenged him and pushed him to do better. Over the next few weeks, their paths crossed more frequently. Sometimes it was by chance. Jack would see Maya collecting water from the creek, or she would pass by while checking her own property. Other times it seemed almost intentional, like fate had a hand in bringing them together. Each meeting was different, but all of them left Jack feeling a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. One afternoon, Jack noticed smoke rising in the distance. He grabbed his binoculars and saw that Maya's barn was on fire. Without thinking, he jumped into his truck and raced toward her property. When he arrived, he saw Maya directing a small group of neighbors, trying to contain the fire until help arrived. She looked determined, fearless, but also exhausted. "Jack," she called when she saw him, "grab the hoses and help me here." Together they fought the fire, working tirelessly until the flames were finally under control. Afterward, they both sat on a fallen log, breathing heavily and covered in soot. Jack looked at her, realizing that her courage and strength were unlike anything he had ever seen. "You're incredible," he said simply. Maya smiled, though her eyes betrayed a hint of worry. "I have to be," she said quietly. Life hasn't been easy, and I have responsibilities. But thank you for helping. I couldn't have done it alone. That evening, as Jack drove back to his ranch, he thought about the fire, the storm, and the days that had passed since he first met Maya. She had become more than just a neighbor. She was someone who challenged him, made him think, and slowly opened his heart again. He realized that he had been living in a kind of emotional prison, shutting out anyone who might hurt him. But Maya, she was different. She didn't just push him. She made him question what he truly wanted from life. The next morning, Jack decided to visit the small-town library. He wanted to learn more about the land Maya lived on, the history of the Apache community, and perhaps understand the woman who had so completely captured his attention. As he flipped through books and old newspapers, he learned about the struggles of the Apache people, their resilience, their traditions, and their connection to the land. Each story made him think about Maya in a new light. She wasn't just fierce. She carried a history, a legacy, and responsibilities that few could understand. When he returned to the ranch, he found Maya waiting by the gate. I was wondering when you'd show up, she said teasingly. Jack laughed. I wanted to understand better. Everything. They walked together, talking about the land, the cattle, and their shared challenges. Jack felt a closeness growing between them, a bond formed not just through conversation, but through shared experience and mutual respect. Maya had a way of listening that made him feel heard for the first time in years. She asked questions that made him reflect, and when he spoke, she never judged. One evening, Jack invited Maya to his porch to watch the sunset. They sat in silence for a while, letting the colors of the sky reflect on the desert below. Jack felt a quiet peace, the kind he hadn't known since Emily's passing. Maya leaned back, eyes tracing the horizon. You've changed, she said softly. Jack looked at her, surprised. I have? Yes, she said, smiling faintly. You're more alive than you were when I first met you. Maybe I did make you lose your mind, after all. Jack laughed, a sound full of genuine warmth. Maybe you did. From that moment on, their friendship deepened. Jack realized that Maya's presence brought more than excitement, it brought meaning. She made him feel alive, not just through her words or actions, but simply by being herself. She challenged him, encouraged him, and reminded him that life, even in the harsh desert, could be beautiful. They continued to spend time together, working on both ranches, sharing meals, and learning about each other's lives. Jack felt a growing respect and affection for Maya, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to experience in years. And though he didn't yet understand the full depth of what was coming, he knew that Maya Red Hawk had changed his life in ways he couldn't ignore. The lonely rancher who once walked through his days in quiet despair now felt a spark of hope. Life, he realized, was unpredictable, and sometimes it took someone extraordinary to remind you of that truth. Maya had arrived like a sudden storm, fierce and unyielding. And in her presence, Jack discovered that even in the harshest desert, life could surprise you. And sometimes, it could surprise you in the most wonderful ways. As the weeks turned into months, Jack and Maya's connection grew stronger. What had started as curiosity had now blossomed into friendship, one that neither of them could ignore. Jack found himself thinking about her throughout the day, while feeding the cattle, repairing fences, or sitting on his porch watching the desert sunset. And whenever he saw her, he felt a rush of emotions he hadn't experienced in years. Excitement, admiration, and a growing warmth in his chest. Maya, too, was beginning to see Jack in a new light. She had always been cautious with strangers, protecting her heart after losing her husband so many years ago. But Jack was different. He was honest, steady, and hard-working. He didn't try to impress her with words or charm. He simply showed up, and his actions spoke louder than any speech. Slowly, Maya felt herself letting her guard down. She started to enjoy their conversations, their shared work, and the quiet moments watching the sun sink behind the mountains. One afternoon, Jack noticed Maya struggling with a heavy load of firewood. Without thinking, he ran over to help her. "Let me," he said, lifting the bundle with ease. Maya raised an eyebrow, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "I can handle it," she said, but Jack shook his head. "Not this time. You've carried enough already." They walked together back to her cabin, the weight of the wood balanced between them. Their hands brushed occasionally, sending sparks of electricity that neither could ignore. They laughed at their clumsiness, but there was a quiet tension in the air, a feeling that something important was shifting between them. After setting the firewood down, they sat on the porch, sipping water and watching the cattle graze. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. Jack finally broke it. "Maya, do you ever feel like you're holding back? Like you're afraid to let someone in?" Maya looked at him carefully, her eyes reflecting both caution and curiosity. "I've been hurt before," she said quietly. "I've learned to protect myself and my children." But she trailed off, and Jack waited patiently. Finally, she added, "But I like being around you. You make things easier, and somehow, you make me feel alive again." Jack felt a lump in his throat. For so long, he had believed he was meant to be alone, that life would continue in the quiet routine of the ranch. But Maya's words changed something inside him. He realized that he too had been holding back, afraid of losing someone again. And now, for the first time in years, he was willing to take a risk. Their days began to intertwine naturally. Jack would help Maya with her property, repairing fences or mending the roof of her barn. She would bring him meals, fresh bread, or homemade preserves, leaving them on his porch with a small note that always made him smile. They shared stories of their pasts, their losses, and their dreams. Jack spoke of Emily, of the life they had built together, and Maya listened without judgment. Maya shared stories of her husband and her children, and Jack admired her strength and resilience. One evening, Jack invited Maya to a small barbecue on his ranch. It wasn't much, just a few steaks on the grill and a couple of chairs by the fire, but it was special because it was the first time he had invited her to his home for something more than work. Maya arrived carrying a small salad and a jar of homemade lemonade. They ate together, talking and laughing as the sun dipped below the horizon. As the night grew darker, Jack noticed how the stars stretched endlessly above them, bright against the deep blue sky. "The desert looks different at night," he said softly. "It feels alive." Maya nodded, smiling. "It does. It's peaceful. But there's also something powerful about it. It makes you think about life and everything in it." Jack looked at her, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "Maya, I've spent so many years alone, thinking I didn't need anyone. But being with you, it feels like I'm finally waking up." Maya reached out and placed her hand on his. The touch was gentle, but it spoke volumes. Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. "I've felt the same," she admitted. "I didn't think I could, but you make me want to try." From that night on, their relationship deepened. They spent more time together, not just working, but sharing simple pleasures, riding horses across the open fields, fishing in the small creek that ran near their properties, and sitting by the fire in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. Jack discovered that he could laugh freely again, and Maya found herself smiling more than she had in years. But life was not without challenges. The townspeople still whispered about Maya, some admiring her independence, others wary of her strength. Jack could feel their stares when he went into town with her, but he didn't care. He knew that what he felt for Maya was genuine, and he was determined to protect it. One afternoon, as they were repairing a section of fence that had been damaged by a recent windstorm, Maya paused and looked at Jack seriously. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Jack stopped working and turned to her, sensing the weight in her tone. "My land, it's under threat," she said. "A developer is trying to buy parts of the reservation, and they've set their eyes on some of the land I care about most. If I don't fight it, I could lose everything." Jack felt a surge of protectiveness. "We'll fight it together," he said without hesitation. "You're not alone in this, Maya. I'll help you." Maya looked at him, her eyes reflecting gratitude and something deeper. I didn't expect you to say that," she admitted. "Most people would have told me to give up, to let them have it. But you're different." Jack shrugged, trying to appear casual, but inside he felt a fierce determination.
"I care about you, Maya."
"And I care about what matters to you. We'll find a way to stop them." The following days were filled with planning and action. Jack and Maya met with lawyers, attended town meetings, and spoke to neighbors who were willing to support them. Jack discovered that Maya's strength was not just in her words or actions, but in her ability to inspire others to stand with her. Together, they became a team, facing obstacles with courage and determination. During these intense days, Jack noticed how much he had changed. He was no longer the lonely rancher who walked through life in a quiet routine. He had found purpose, a reason to fight, and a connection that made every challenge worth facing. Maya had awakened something in him: courage, hope, and a willingness to open his heart again. One evening, after a long day of meetings and planning, they sat on the porch of Maya's cabin, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the desert seemed to glow with warmth. Jack reached out and took Maya's hand. "No matter what happens," he said softly, "we'll face it together." Maya squeezed his hand, a small smile on her lips. "Together," she echoed. In that moment, Jack realized that the lonely days of the past were gone. He had found someone who challenged him, inspired him, and made him feel alive in a way he hadn't known was possible. Maya had become more than a friend. She was a partner, someone who would stand by him through the storms and sunshine alike. As the stars began to twinkle above, Jack felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. Life was unpredictable, yes, but with Maya by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. The challenges were real, and the road ahead would not always be easy. But for the first time in a long time, he felt hope, courage, and love. Maya Redhawk had entered his life like a force of nature, fierce and unstoppable, and in her presence Jack Thompson discovered that the heart could heal, and life could surprise even the most cautious soul. The lonely rancher had changed, and the woman who had promised to make him lose his mind had done just that, but not in anger or chaos, in awakening and love. And as they sat side by side, hands entwined, watching the desert fade into night, Jack knew that this was only the beginning. Together they would face challenges, celebrate victories, and find a life richer than either had ever imagined. The peace Jack and Maya had built began to face its first true test. One morning, as Jack rode across his ranch, he noticed unfamiliar trucks parked near the edge of Maya's property. Men in suits were speaking with a local official. Maps and papers spread across the hood of a truck. Jack's stomach sank. He knew immediately what this meant. The developer had returned, and this time they were serious. Maya was in her barn when Jack arrived. She was talking to her eldest son, showing him how to secure the stalls and keep the cattle calm. When she saw Jack approaching, she wiped her hands on a rag and walked toward him. "I was afraid this day would come," she said quietly. Jack shook his head. "We won't let them take your land," he said firmly. "Whatever it takes, we'll fight this together." Maya looked at him, her eyes both grateful and worried. "I've fought before," she said, "but this could be different. They have money, lawyers, and influence. They won't back down easily." Jack felt a surge of determination. "Neither will we," he said. "We have truth, courage, and each other. That counts for something." They began organizing a plan immediately. Jack helped Maya gather evidence of the land's historical significance and its importance to her family. They talked to neighbors, community leaders, and even local journalists. Jack was amazed at Maya's tenacity. She spoke with confidence and authority, inspiring others to join their cause. Days turned into nights as they worked tirelessly. Jack spent hours poring over documents, making calls, and visiting officials with Maya. The intensity of the work brought them even closer. They shared late meals, laughed at small victories, and comforted each other during setbacks. The pressure was immense, but they discovered a strength in themselves and each other that they had never known before. One evening, after a particularly long day at a town hall meeting, Jack and Maya walked along a quiet trail on her property. The sun had just set, and the desert was bathed in soft twilight. Maya stopped and faced him. "Jack, I need you to know. I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack took her hands in his. "I know," he said, "and it's okay to be scared. But fear doesn't mean we give up. It means we have something worth fighting for." Maya looked into his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she let herself relax. "You really mean that?" she asked. Jack nodded. Every word. The days that followed tested their courage like never before. The developer tried to intimidate them, sending letters and making threats. Some of Maya's neighbors were pressured to withdraw support, and the legal battles seemed endless. But Jack and Maya refused to back down. Together they faced every obstacle, drawing strength from each other. During this time, Jack realized how much Maya had changed him. He was no longer the quiet, lonely rancher who had resigned himself to a life of solitude. He was active, engaged, and willing to fight for something that mattered. And more than that, he had opened his heart to someone again, something he hadn't thought possible. Maya, too, felt her perspective shift. She had always relied on her own strength, trusting few people with her vulnerabilities. But with Jack by her side, she discovered that sharing her burdens didn't make her weak. It made her stronger. Together, they were a team, unstoppable and determined. The turning point came when Jack discovered a crucial piece of evidence. A set of old property records showing that Maya's family had legal claim to the disputed land for generations. With this, they were able to confront the developer in a town meeting, presenting their case with confidence and clarity. The room was tense as lawyers argued and neighbors voiced their support. Jack and Maya stood side by side, their combined presence commanding attention and respect. When the developer finally realized that the community and the law were against him, he withdrew. Maya's land was safe. Relief washed over them both, but it was not just relief at victory. It was the knowledge that they had faced a real threat together and had emerged stronger. That night, Jack and Maya sat on her porch, watching the stars stretch across the desert sky. Neither spoke at first, each lost in thought. Finally, Maya broke the silence. "We did it," she said softly. Jack nodded, squeezing her hand. "We did it together." And I realized something during all of this. He paused, searching for the right words. "I don't want to go back to the way things were before. I don't want to be alone again." Maya's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of joy. "Neither do I," she said. From that moment on, life on the ranch felt different. The challenges they faced had strengthened their bond, transforming their connection from friendship into something deeper and more profound. Jack felt a sense of purpose and belonging he had never known, and Maya felt the comfort of trust and partnership she had long denied herself. Together, they began planning the future, not just for their ranches, but for themselves. They dreamed of shared projects, family gatherings, and quiet evenings watching the desert sunset. Jack realized that the lonely days of his past were gone forever, replaced by hope, love, and a shared life with someone who truly mattered. Maya had fulfilled her promise to make him lose his mind, but in a way neither of them had anticipated. She had challenged him, inspired him, and awakened a part of his heart that had lain dormant for years. And in the desert, under the endless sky, Jack Thompson finally understood what it meant to be alive again, truly alive, with someone by his side who made life brighter, richer, and infinitely more meaningful. After the long struggle with the developer and the battle to protect her land, life for Jack and Maya finally began to settle into a new rhythm. The tension that had filled the past months was slowly replaced with a quiet sense of accomplishment and peace. Jack felt a calm he had never known before. He was no longer just a lonely rancher going through the motions of life. Now each day held purpose, and he had someone by his side who shared his dreams and fears, and who reminded him that life could be full, bright, and meaningful. The ranch itself seemed more alive than ever. The cattle grazed contentedly under the bright Arizona sun, the fences stood firm and well-maintained, and the land stretched out endlessly, promising freedom and hope. Jack and Maya spent their mornings working together, checking the cattle, repairing fences, and planning improvements. Sometimes they even rode the open fields on horseback, the wind whipping past them and the desert stretching in every direction. Jack realized that with Maya, even the simplest tasks felt exciting. One afternoon, while repairing a section of fence near a small creek, Maya paused to rest. She sat on a rock, letting the sun warm her face. Jack joined her, carrying 2 bottles of water. "You know," he said, handing her one, "I never imagined life could feel like this again. I thought my best days were behind me." Maya smiled, taking a sip. "I know what you mean. I thought I had to handle everything alone, that no one could help me carry the weight of the world. But having you by my side makes everything feel possible." Jack looked at her, feeling a lump in his throat. "I don't just want to help you with the ranch, Maya. I want to be part of your life in every way I can." Maya's eyes softened, and she reached out to touch his hand. "And I want the same," she whispered. Their bond continued to grow stronger over the following weeks. They shared meals together, sometimes cooking side by side in Jack's modest kitchen, other times enjoying Maya's home-cooked meals in her cabin. They laughed often, joked about small mishaps on the ranch, and supported each other through the occasional frustration that came with daily life. But beyond the laughter, there was a deep sense of trust and understanding. They could read each other's moods, finish each other's sentences, and even sit together in silence without feeling awkward. Jack found himself opening up more than he had in years. He shared memories of Emily, speaking of her with respect and love, and Maya listened with patience and empathy. She encouraged him to remember the joy he had experienced without feeling guilt for moving forward. In turn, Jack listened to Maya's stories about her husband and the challenges of raising her children on her own. He admired her courage, resilience, and the quiet determination that had guided her through life's difficulties. One evening, after a long day of tending to the cattle, Jack suggested they take a walk along the ridgeline near the edge of the property. The sun was beginning to set, casting golden light across the desert and turning the mountains a soft pink. Maya agreed, and they walked side by side, enjoying the quiet beauty of the landscape. "Do you ever think about the future?" Jack asked, glancing at her. "All the time," Maya replied. "I want stability for my children, security for the land, and happiness. But I didn't think I could find that for myself until recently." Jack stopped walking and turned to her. "You deserve happiness, Maya, and I want to share that with you." Maya's eyes glistened in the fading light. She reached out and held his hand tightly. "I want that too, Jack. I've waited a long time to feel like this again." The following months were filled with shared joys and small adventures. They worked together to expand the ranch, planting a small garden, building a new barn, and creating a space where both families could gather. They hosted neighbors and friends for meals, sharing stories and laughter under the stars. Jack noticed how happy Maya's children were around him, how they laughed at his jokes and respected his guidance. He felt a sense of family he had never imagined he could have again. One crisp morning, Jack decided to make a surprise for Maya. He had been working quietly on a small gazebo near the edge of the property, overlooking the desert valley. When Maya arrived, he led her to the spot, revealing the finished structure. "I wanted a place where we could sit and watch the sunset together," Jack explained. Maya's eyes filled with tears, a mix of happiness and gratitude. "It's beautiful," she said softly. I don't know what to say. Just enjoy it," Jack said with a smile. "We'll make a lot of memories here." As they sat together that evening, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to deep indigo, Jack realized how far they had come. He had once believed that life was only a series of routines and responsibilities. Now he understood that life could be rich with love, purpose, and connection. Maya had brought color, excitement, and meaning back into his world, just as he had begun to bring stability, trust, and partnership into hers. Their love deepened gradually, built on respect, shared experiences, and understanding. They celebrated small victories together: harvests from the garden, successful repairs to the barns, and improvements to the ranch. They supported each other through minor setbacks, illnesses, and long days of labor. Each challenge they faced only strengthened their bond. The true test of their relationship came when a medical scare threatened Maya's health. She had been feeling unusually tired and had a persistent cough. Jack insisted she visit the town doctor. When the results came back, it was a minor but serious condition that required care and rest. Jack stayed by her side, ensuring she took her medication, helping with chores she couldn't manage, and providing comfort through sleepless nights. Maya realized in those moments that love was not only about joy, but about support, patience, and unwavering presence during hard times. When Maya recovered fully, they celebrated together, knowing they had emerged stronger as a team. Jack saw the sparkle in her eyes once more and felt a renewed sense of gratitude for having her in his life. He realized that their journey together was not just about love. It was about partnership, respect, and shared dreams. One afternoon, while walking through the fields, Maya turned to Jack. "I want you to know something," she said. "You didn't just help me save my land. You helped me find myself again. You made me believe I could be happy and loved. And for that, I'm grateful every day." Jack smiled, feeling a warmth in his heart he had not known for years. "And you've done the same for me, Maya. I used to think my life was over when Emily passed, that my best days were behind me, but with you, I feel alive again. I can dream again, and I want to keep dreaming with you." As the seasons changed, Jack and Maya's relationship became the heart of their lives. The ranch thrived, their families grew closer, and their community respected and admired them for their resilience, courage, and love. Jack felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. He had once been a lonely man, wandering through his days without purpose. Now he had someone to share his joys, sorrows, and victories, a true partner in life. The desert remained vast and quiet, stretching endlessly under the sky. But within that space, Jack and Maya had carved out a life full of love, trust, and hope. The challenges they had faced together, storms, fires, threats, and fears, had only strengthened their bond. They had discovered that life's beauty was not in avoiding hardships, but in facing them together, hand in hand. One evening, Jack took Maya to the small gazebo he had built months before. The sun was setting, painting the desert in deep oranges and purples. He turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "Maya Redhawk," he said softly, "you came into my life like a storm, fierce and unstoppable. You made me feel alive again, and I can't imagine my life without you. Will you share the rest of your life with me?" Maya's eyes filled with tears, a joyful smile spreading across her face. "Yes, Jack," she said. "I want to spend my life with you." They embraced as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert. Jack felt a sense of peace, happiness, and fulfillment he had never known before. Maya had kept her promise in a way he hadn't expected. She had made him lose his mind, not in chaos, but in love, hope, and renewed purpose. From that day forward, Jack Thompson and Maya Redhawk built a life together filled with love, laughter, and shared dreams. They worked side by side on their ranches, supported each other through challenges, and celebrated life's simple joys. Jack was no longer the lonely rancher wandering through life alone. He had found his heart again, and it beat stronger because of the woman who had changed everything. Under the endless sky of the Arizona desert, Jack and Maya stood together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever the future held. Their journey had been full of trials, lessons, and growth. And in the quiet of the desert, surrounded by the land they loved and the lives they had built, they discovered a truth as vast as the horizon itself. Life is richest when shared with someone who truly matters.